If you're having paranormal issues, contact us at mwghosthunters.com. From the files of the Midwest Ghost Hunters.
All right, Midwest Ghost Hunters site investigation, recorder 1.
Oh, Dustin, right there. Something just moved behind you.
Yes, it did. What the was that?
What happened?
Something touched my ear, man.
What's that?
This is Dark Matter with Midwest Ghost Hunters.
Oh, we had an interesting start to the day already. Now, me and John did hear some stuff.
Yeah, when we were setting up, there was sound like
when we
more
were
people.
Breaking into the castle.
I would say that I would position it a little different. I would say that we were gaining access to the building.
Well, yeah, we won't go into the ins and outs of how we got in, but we had to get in, and the door we usually use wasn't open, so we made our way inside. But once inside, we did hear some footsteps on the stairs,
Yeah.
or somewhere over there. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. And then you had the it's been raining and storming here all day. You had the haunted house sound effect wind in the background. It was kind of odd. But anyway, we've had an interesting start here already. On the last podcast, I think it was the last one. I can't remember. It was me and Dustin and Hunter. I think it was just us. But we had the idea during the podcast to kind of do something inspired by a show that we used to listen to. I used to listen to it all the time, called Coast to Coast AM. I think it's still on in podcast form or something.
I think it is. I haven't listened to it in 20 years.
Well, I haven't either. But we not even consciously, but we've kind of borrowed some of their formatics on our podcast. Because like we've said before, a lot of the paranormal podcasts you listen to has some dude, who comes on, with a drone behind him talking like Dracula.
Yeah. So we were unintentionally inspired.
Yes, Coast to Coast always did this very conversational, just a radio show type show.
Yeah, people have some fantastic stories.
Yeah, and he would get calls, they would get calls in on everything from, hauntings to, like we said, time travel stuff, cryptids, all kinds of stuff. So we invited, our listeners on the last podcast to email us if they had a story that they wanted to tell on the podcast about any of that stuff. It could be anything. It could be a UFO. It could be anything like that. We just kind of wanted to hear some of the listener. We wanted to get some listener contributions in because that's one area where we haven't really dabbled in a whole lot. We did get some emails in for people wanting to tell their stories, and we picked one. And by the way, if you would like to be on the podcast with whatever story you have, whether it's a Bigfoot or a UFO or a ghost stuff.
Time travel.
Feel free. Yeah, time travel. That's one. I hope we get one. I think the odds are slim. Or like a glitch in the Matrix time travel thing. Anyway, you can email us, contact at mwghosthunters.com, and we will get you on too. But today, we've got Adrian. Hers was the story that we picked to go first. Adrian, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hello. So you're in Indiana, right?
Yes.
And the town you're in, is that near Indianapolis?
No, I'm actually on the Indiana-Michigan state line.
Oh, okay.
It's about 5 minutes north of Notre Dame, if you guys know where that is.
Gotcha.
It's called Granger, Indiana.
Yeah. Okay.
It's real close to South Bend.
Gotcha. So you sent us a story, and I'm not going to sit here and read what you sent us. The whole point of it was to kind of get you on to kind of tell your story. So just kind of go. So basically, what was the basic the foundation of your story? What happened?
Well, it started out when I was real young. My dad always made comments about, it must be the specters in the house or something. And I didn't believe him and didn't know what he was talking about until one day I saw it looked like a Native American. And I'm like, this is weird. And I kind of ran down. I'm like, Mom. And she told me she'd seen him before. And it went on for years that I would always see mostly the Native American, but I've seen a Civil War era guy in that house and what looked like a lumberjack.
So when you say
house.
you saw, you're talking about like a full-bodied type apparition that you saw.
Yeah. Well, mainly at least from like his torso up is what I remember seeing. I remember clearly seeing like the Civil War era soldier walking with like legs, but he didn't seem to he just seemed like he was walking past us all the time. I'm like, okay.
So that would, you've probably heard us talk before about intelligent and residual type stuff. That kind of sounds like maybe a residual type thing that you saw. What was the history of the house itself?
I know that where we live is right by the Popecagan Band of like the Potawatomis, right across the St. Joe River from where they used to do a whole lot of powwows and such. So I know that there was a whole lot of Native American activity and such in that area, but I've never been able to find like any battles or anything that was fought in the area.
How long ago was it the last time you saw any of these?
We moved out of that house in 97. So it was around there that, like, the last time that I saw them. They would pop up all the time.
Now,
How old were you?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Were you a kid? Or I'm not trying to ask how old you are now.
Oh, no. Okay, yeah. I was like a mid-teenager last time I saw that happening at that house.
And were you the only one, or did others too?
No, my mom saw them too. My dad just didn't believe us. He was like, yeah, sure, it's just those ghosts again.
Were there any interactions, or was it just you seeing them?
Not really any interactions. The only couple of times I saw the lumberjack guy, though, he would like stare at me. And when I screamed, he would just disappear. I'm like, are you watching me?
Well, that's a little off-putting. Was this kind of stuff happening in the middle of the night, during the day, or just all the time?
All the time. The first time I saw that lumberjack guy, I was just sitting on my bed talking on the phone. And I'm like, was in my room because I thought I saw someone over my shoulder. And I turned around and I just screamed.
Like, was there any audio that corresponded with the visual? Like, could you hear the footsteps or anything as they moved?
I mean, we could always hear footsteps in that house, but I don't know if it was... I can't say that it was like ghost type footsteps or if it was just my dad walking around because he always had a very heavy foot.
Gotcha. Well, that's definitely interesting. Is anybody in your family still living there?
No, they sold that house when my grandfather died, and we moved into the house that my mom still lives in now. And that house, you can tell the difference in the footsteps.
You mean the new house also has stuff too?
Yes, that one always has since my grandmother died. And you could always tell the difference because when we moved in, like I said, my dad had the heavy footsteps, but if we were downstairs or something, you could hear light ones. And my nieces told me that they had heard them one night when they spent the night. They were younger. I'd say they were probably 9 or 10. And my grandmother died in that house, but they were sleeping in the living room. And they said they thought they heard someone walking down the hall. And they looked up and they said they saw a blonde woman. And it just freaked them out. And they put their heads back under the blanket. And they told me this like a year later. And I'm like, what was she wearing? And they're like, well, she was blonde and she had on a pink dress. And we buried my grandmother in a pink dress, which is, I'm like, okay, well, maybe you saw her. She died in the house.
So did any of the characters that were in the old house carry over to the new one, like the lumberjack or the Native American?
No, I never saw any of them in the new house.
Well, that's... Definitely. I'm trying to think. I don't know why. I'm trying to rationalize what it could be. Then there's no point in doing that. Did you ever get anything on, like, did you ever try? I know a lot of people, and this isn't saying we encourage this, but I know a lot of people go this route. Have you ever tried like a Ouija board or anything?
I did one time, and my mom and my dad are very, very Catholic. So when they found it in the house, she took it down to the church and had it burned with holy oil.
Oh, did it work?
What we got... What I don't know, I don't think it was a very good that came through. I think they tried to say that it was my grandmother, but I can tell you, I remember they told us what their name was, and my cousin started acting very weird, like, I don't know, like weird and like possessed, and she started picking up a knife and walking around, and so no, I've never touched it again. And I now firmly believe that you can pull in all kinds of horrible things with that stuff.
So I guess where my question is headed next is kind of an awkward one to ask, because it makes it sound like we're like deep believers in these things like the Ouija board or whatever, and we're not necessarily. But I know we've all heard people talk about certain people being sensitive. Do you consider yourself sensitive, and have you seen anything like in your adult life in your own home?
Yeah, there's things that still happen all the time. A couple years ago, I was sitting at my mom's house. We were looking through old pictures right after my dad passed. And I happened to find my grandfather's fishing license. And the man fished every single day, every day, religiously. And he always told us, where there's something for you, there's something for your daughter, like meaning my mom and me. Well, I opened it up and there was $100 bill in there. And she ripped it out of my hand. And she's like, that's mine, order of succession. And the light behind her went out. And we're like, what? I'm like, I found it. So then I'm like, we're talking about it. And I'm like, let's get this light back on, because it just didn't hit us right away. That's almost like, I don't know, that made me think of Ghostbusters Afterlife. Did you guys see that? Right.
Egon was communicating through the blinking lights in the house.
Well, I couldn't get it to turn back on.
No
spoilers. So I picked it up and it unscrewed a little bit. I'm like, okay, we're just going to blow that off. That's not that weird. The light bulb came unscrewed. It happens, right?
Right.
Then I opened it up and there was another $100 bill in there. And so I'm like, she tried to rip it from my hand. I'm like, no, this is mine. And then the light went out again. And I'm like, what the hell is that? Or sorry, I'm like, what the heck is that?
Oh, no.
There's no censorship on here.
You're fine.
Okay. The light had come a little bit unscrewed again. And I'm like, I can kind of like say, no, maybe that wasn't, maybe I just didn't screw it in. But we just like dropped everything right then and there. It's like, fine, you take 100, I'm taking 100. Grandpa said there was always something for either of us. Let's be done with looking at pictures for now.
Nice. Well, that was 200 all you found? There may be more stashed in there somewhere.
Well, that was all I found, because it's like the fishing licenses come in what looks like a little wallet. So there was a pocket on each side, and it was folded up like 4 times on each side. So when I pulled them out, they fell out.
Well, that is...
I'm going to go back
he was
real
from
quick.
the era where you kept money everywhere.
Yeah, people would stuff money in their Bibles.
So when you talked about the Ouija board, I just want to make sure I get this right. Was the Ouija board used in like experimented with before or after the sightings of the things?
Like, did you see the apparitions, then try the Ouija board? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Or did you try the Ouija board and then stuff started happening?
No, we did it after. Me and my cousin just did it one time just because she was like, well, you say that there's ghosts in your house, so let's try this. And I'm like, okay, sure. Stupid teenagers. Let's go ahead and do this.
So in your email, you talked about, and I was listening to you and reading your email at the same time because I didn't want to sit here and, recite your email to you. You wrote it. But you were talking about seeing someone walking, holding hands in the yard?
It was right after my grandfather had passed in 97. They built that house together. Like, I have pictures of me helping to plaster the walls when I was like a year old. And we moved in there after he died. And my grandmother died in the house. So I was just sitting out there. This was about right after his funeral, so a week or two after they died. And I was just sitting on the lawn by the trees that I always sat by just when I was upset or depressed. And I thought I saw people walking through my yard. And I'm like, what's kind of going on here? And then I saw them holding hands, and they stopped and kind of looked at me and just sort of they just kind of smiled and just started walking on and kind of faded off. And I'm like, that's weird, but I'll take it. I'm not going to ever try to dismiss that. I'm just going to take it as I saw my grandparents. And
then you actually had some interaction at one point. Didn't you say that was your grandmother that would say your name or something?
Yeah, I'd always hear when my child was little, I'd hear my name or a little whistle. In this house that I live in now, it's kind of scary. I hear the whistle, but it's also accompanied by something pulling on the back of my shirt.
What was the word you said? Pulling. Pulling. Oh, okay.
Like a pulling on the back of my shirt. And that I don't know what it could be or anything, but I'll be in the kitchen, mostly in the kitchen, and I'll hear a whistle, and then it'll follow by a pull on my shirt, and I'm like, what? And there's no one there. Or I'll start talking because I'll think my husband's in the room with me because I'll see what looks like a body walk in, and all of a sudden I'm like, where are you? Or am I talking to myself? And I walk out there, he's like, you must be. I'm like, were you in the kitchen? He's like, nope.
So what is the most recent interaction or activity like that you just explained that's happened?
I'd say the most recent was maybe about 5 or 6 months ago is the last time that happened here. And we live deep in the woods, so when I say that I see a shadow, there's no way that it could be light from the outside or car lights because we don't even live by a street.
You got any Bigfoot stories to come from those woods?
Not necessarily Bigfoot. I always think there's something in the back northeast corner, but it could just be my mind going crazy at that one because I don't like being out there.
Yeah. Now, there's no way we're going to continue on here without me bringing up let me see what word you used. And I'm not making fun of you. I'm just looking because it caught my attention. The phantom pea spots.
Yes. Okay. So my poodle that we had, for God love her, she lived to be 17. She got Cushing's disease. And we would find pea spots all over the house because she couldn't hold her bladder.
Right.
And even up to a couple years ago, I would still see, and my mom would see them too, and she's like, is that a pea spot? And it would just look like a little wet spot on the carpet. And I mean, I still have her collar and some of her fur because that was my soul dog.
Yeah.
That was the dog that I grew up with. So I still have some of her stuff in that house. So every so often we'll just look down and it'll be a different shade on the carpet and it doesn't feel wet or anything. We're like, but that looks like a pea spot. That looks like a Gidget pea spot.
I'm not laughing at you. It's just that's one I've never heard. You know, we've heard about
the weirdest
pets.
thing.
Yeah, I've never heard of a ghost dog peeing.
We've heard about ghost cats and ghost dogs and stuff. You know, in pictures and security cameras. I've never heard of the urine spots.
I think I'm crazy saying that too, but it's the weirdest thing that we're like a pee spot. Why is there a pee spot on the carpet?
Go ahead,
Okay,
Dustin.
I'm going to ask a very strange question here. Does it smell?
That's what I was going to ask. But then I started thinking, I was like, you know, if it was cat pee, you know, if it was phantom cat pee, you would be able to tell.
You'd smell it.
Because cat pee
smell it if it was cat
stinks.
pee.
But she said it wasn't really wet, so I'm assuming, I'm putting words in your mouth maybe, that it probably didn't have an odor either. Is that
No,
right?
it wasn't. It wasn't wet at all.
Did you smell it?
No.
I'm sorry, I have to ask.
That's such a strange question to ask, but
I have to ask. You know,
No, we didn't smell it.
press your finger into it and then smell your finger or something. I don't know. We're not making fun of you. It's just.
No, I know. No, yeah, I never got down to try to smell one. I mean, if we see one again here soon.
Now, Dustin, would that
Maybe
be
I
your
will.
would that be your debunking advice for that one?
that'd
Is
be the
get
first thing I'd do.
stick your nose in it.
That's what I'm. Next time we see one of those,
Have
I'm
you
going to
ever-
get down. I'm going to smell it, and then I'm going to let you guys know.
Yeah, we'd love to know.
Have you ever been able to capture any audio, any video, anything from that? Because it sounds like you've got a lot of activity
Historically,
that's going
yeah.
around there.
Everyone tells me, don't do anything like audio or video in your house unless you really want to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to know, but I'm also like,
I'm
do I
with
want
you.
to know?
I understand that completely.
That's
Is
actually
it
good
gonna
advice.
terrify me more? Is
Well,
it-
and that's something we've talked about. You know, if you think you have activity, a lot of people ask, should I, you know, run my recorder on my phone? It's like, well, you can, but you got to be prepared for what you might get.
Yeah, and based on some of the recordings that I've gotten, it's probably better to not get that.
Are you talking about
In your own house?
in your
John?
own
No,
house?
no,
Okay.
I'm talking about the stuff that we've caught
Oh, yeah.
when we've been out places.
Yes. Yeah, some of that stuff. I mean, if I lived there, hell, there would be a for sale sign in the yard that
Yeah,
day.
I couldn't handle that.
yeah, I'm not going to run a recorder in this house I live in now because I don't know what's whistling in my ear and pulling on my shirt. I don't know if they like me or not.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you never know. So
My husband was like, well, the only person it could be would be one of my grandparents. And I'm like, in your mind, that's the only person it could be.
and is this house that you live in the woods one you guys built?
No, it was his house. It's his family home.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. I just moved in here when we got married.
Gotcha.
And has he experienced a lot of the same stuff that you've experienced too?
I mean, he just blows it off. He's like, I'm not saying I don't believe you, but there's got to be an explanation for it.
Right.
So he doesn't say anything. He's like, nope, it's a shadow. It's whatever.
Yeah. That tends to be the husband angle lots of times.
Yeah.
Have you had anything aggressive happen? Like anything that seems like it's doesn't want you there? Because most so far this all sounds fairly, you know, benign as far as, you know, not wanting to like run you out or anything like that.
No, I don't think anything really wants to run me out. I just don't know if they really, I don't know, are happy with his choice in wife. I don't know.
And I do have to circle back to my question earlier. I don't know if I said it right. Do you consider yourself like sensitive, or do you just feel like you've been put in situations where there's been lots of activity?
I mean, I think to a point I am. I think I've lost some of that with some of the trauma that I've been through the last couple of years with my dad passing and my mom having heart problems.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've blocked some of it out. I think I did used to be a lot more sensitive to it than I am now.
Okay. We hear people say that, you know, a lot. People who've had historically a lot of activity, you know, when they were kids that's, you know, drawn right into their adulthood. A lot of people, you know, say they're sensitive. They may very well be. I just didn't know if you considered yourself to be sensitive like that. Have you ever had any team like ours come out and see if they could catch anything, or have you just chosen to just let it be?
I've chosen to kind of just let it be. I know that me and a friend of mine there's a guy that does ghost hunts at a mansion here in South Bend. I kind of don't really think anything that happened in that house. I don't want to say anything negative against him.
Okay.
But I think a lot of things can be debunked in that house.
Mm-hmm.
But me and my friend had some stuff happen after we left there in my car. And I'm like, did something attach itself to us?
Right.
I think that it's wise, though, when you're looking at paranormal groups, that you don't want to, because there's certain types of paranormal groups that are going to want to catch quote-unquote ghosts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're not going to debunk as much as they're going to try to show that is a ghost, when in fact, if they were really good at debunking, they could probably eliminate a lot of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, like we had caught some stuff on a recorder that I had, but again, we chose that we're like, no, this guy was just trying to catch stuff.
Yeah.
And has like a quote unquote haunted doll that he interacts. And I'm like,
He brings his own haunted doll? Is that what?
It's a Cabbage Patch, yes.
What? He brings it with him?
A haunted
Yeah,
Cabbage Patch?
I don't know if it stays at the house or if he takes it with him when he leaves the house.
You know, we don't really know anything about the individual you're talking about, but if a person shows up with a haunted doll, that's
it's
kind of
the
a red
house that-
flag for us.
And I don't know if he owns this mansion that he does these ghost quote unquote goat hunts at, or if he's just like renting it out. But I mean, he's thrown like wild parties there one night, and the next night is a ghost hunt.
Are you talking about Studebaker Mansion?
It's the Birdsell Mansion. It's
Okay.
not Studebaker. It's Birdsell Mansion.
I've heard of, not to get off onto a side rant here, but I've heard of the Tippecanoe place. Mm-hmm. That's near you, right?
Yep, that is near me. Studebaker Mansion is near me. There are like tunnels that are documented under South Bend that connect Studebaker and Birdsell and Tippecanoe and the jail and the hospital.
So what I'm talking about here, for you guys who don't know, it's kind of like their local Pythian Castle type place.
Yes.
It's a big mansion, the Studebaker
Yeah,
Mansion.
Studebaker
Which
is.
has underground tunnels.
Yeah, much like we have here. I just had to throw that in and ask. Every now and then, Adrian, we have the producers from different shows. And as we get people calling in, this is something I'm going to ask, because we do have producers from certain paranormal shows email us and ask us if anybody has any stories that they would be willing to go on one of their shows with. When I say shows, I'm talking about like Paranormal Witness, or there's a whole slew of them. Is that something you would ever be interested in, just in case they ask?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Now that I've talked to you guys and I'm a little more comfortable.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Especially like my mom's house, not the house that I live in now, but my mom's house.
Is your mom's house the one that you saw the
My grandparents and the phantom pea spots. And
Okay. Okay.
And we're going to smell those soon.
And what was the
Yes.
house that you saw the Native American and the Civil
The
War
lumberjack
era?
and the lumberjack.
Yeah, that was just the first house that I grew up in. My parents bought that when they got married, and that was just our first home. It was it was a country area at the time. It's not now, but it was real close to like St. Patrick's Park, which was part of like the Potawatomi lands and such that it was at the time.
The Native Americans would have had, if this Civil War era soldier was dressed like a Union officer, that would be in the same era that they would have had, a lot of the the conflicts going on.
Yeah.
So I mean that would make sense.
I just
Yeah.
never read anything about any like big battles or anything, so I didn't try to. And I was also a teenager, so I didn't try to dive into it too much.
Yeah,
at the time.
and as far as like Civil War soldier spottings go, those don't always happen in Gettysburg type areas. They pop up. That's the reason I brought up Paranormal Witness, is because number one, they do email us and ask us every now and then, and number two, your story reminded me of one of those an episode of that I saw one time where there was a Civil War soldier inside a home where there was really no history of a significant battle that happened.
Well, what it could have something to do with, though, if you're looking at a Native American and you're looking at someone who she describes as a Civil War era uniform, those uniforms would have looked very, very similar to the ones when they were moving like the Trail of Tears and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So it may not be a Civil War at all.
Yeah.
It may just be a Union soldier she saw.
It would have been Union too, because Indiana gave a lot of Union soldiers came from Indiana.
Yeah.
It was a Union supporting state. So
our go-to is to try to explain why people are experiencing certain activity. Sorry about that.
No, absolutely.
If you have, is there anything else you wanted to add before we go?
No, I mean,
that's a lot.
It is a lot. I mean, I know that my son had a couple experiences when he was little
in the house you're in now?
in my mom's house that he kind of brought over to my house.
Okay, what happened with him?
When he was little, typical baby stuff, they're always sitting there laughing and staring at the corner, and you're like, why? He was about 2, and he jumped out of his crib, and I could hear him run down the hall into my room, and he's like, Busha's crying. Busha is grandma, because we're Polish. And I'm like, Busha's crying? Why is she crying in the hallway? because she misses you. And he got confused. He goes, she misses her baby. She misses you and Busha. And I'm like, but if Busha's crying. And I had him kind of describe her. And he described the same thing that my nieces did with a blonde lady with a pink dress.
Huh.
A couple years later, he was about 4. He was running down the hall and I hung up a picture of my grandfather. And he's like, oh my God, that's Ross. And I'm like, what? He goes, that's my friend Ross. He is so funny. And I'm like, how? And no one ever said my grandpa's name. I mean, we wouldn't. He'd been passed for over a decade at that point. So if I said anything, it was always Grandpa. It was never Ross. And I'm like, how do you know Ross? He's funny. He lives at Busha's house. And I'm like,
how old was your son when this was happening?
Between 2 and 4.
Oh, okay.
And I'd always hear, like, if Roman would start crying, I'd hear, get him, or he's crying.
Huh.
And I'm like, who said that?
Well, that's
But I think it was more of, yeah, but it felt more like, are you going to get your son that's crying? Like,
right.
Not in a bad way, but more of a protective over him.
Just like a
type of way.
free babysitter way.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that just kind of like spilled over from my mom's house because my mom and dad babysat him when he was young, like every day.
Right.
And they picked him up from school. He was there every day.
Well, you've got a lot of tales to tell for sure. Supposedly there's you're not far from Gary, Indiana.
No, we're not. It's about, I'd say about maybe an hour-ish.
There's a new Netflix show coming out soon based on a haunted house, kind of like Amityville there in Gary, Indiana.
Oh, wow.
I think it's called The Exorcism of Evil. And that may already be out. I'm not sure. But that's based on an Amityville type home there in Gary, Indiana that might be of interest to you.
Oh, that'd be interesting because I thought there was a house there that they like burnt down.
That's it. That's the one.
It is?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
That house sounds crazy.
Yeah, that's the one. That'll be on Netflix here either already or soon. But anyway, hey, we appreciate you telling your story. And if anything new happens or if you get a whiff of that pee.
I am. I will let you guys know. I'm gonna go over there and be like, Mom, next time you see one of them spot, you need to smell it.
Well, listen, Adrian, we appreciate you being on. If anything else happens, feel free to let us know, and we can have you back on anytime, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, see you later. A lot of stuff happening there with her, historically and, present day. Some of it could be explained as, residual type stuff. We're not going to go too deep into that, but just, some people have this, they, like even Ashley, at her home, she's had experiences, her whole life, she says. So I don't know if you get into the whole, some people are more sensitive than others or what. There.
The thing I liked about her was that she was reluctant to bring in a paranormal group because she was afraid that that was somebody who was going to definitely tell her she had a ghost.
Right.
And wasn't going to be good at debunking. And I salute her for that, by the way.
That's what many of them will do, unfortunately, is hey, we're here to find a ghost and we're going to find one before we leave.
But it just helps with your credibility if you're willing to admit that,
Yeah. And I really thought that was awesome that she had an issue with somebody for that, and I thought that was great.
Right, with the Cabbage Patch Kid.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah, John keeps his haunted doll in his car.
In the trunk, yeah.
Right, yeah. We travel with it.
There's a protocol for proper storage of your haunted Cabbage Patch
doll.
Kid.
John's a step up above the Cabbage Patch Kids. He's got haunted Beanie Babies.
Yeah. There you go. I like that.
So anyway, thank you to Adrian for being on the podcast. And if anybody else has any kind of story, like we said, it can be anything really. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be ghosts. It can be anything, that we would consider paranormal. Feel free to email us, contact@mwghosthunters.com, and we will get in touch with you and set up. Because I don't know, I like hearing from the people who listen to the podcast.
Yeah, I do too.
The part that kind of stuck with me for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's just because it's kind of creepy, was when she talked about her kid. First of all, calling the grandpa by his first name,
right?
Because you wouldn't say his first name of your grandfather to your small child. It'd be grandpa,
Yeah, kids aren't necessarily susceptible. That would be usually when a kid experiences something like that, it's truly their own experience that they're happening. I mean, could that experience be make believe possibly, but in a situation where a name is used like that,
she seemed very genuine,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And all those claims were things we've heard before in houses we've went to and then caught audio.
Yes.
It wasn't anything like extreme or crazy. Like it was
like the guy who said he had venom in his house. Venom, as in Spider-Man's nemesis.
I don't remember a guy that said he had venom.
Right across the street.
Like, did he mean Venom as in the Marvel villain?
Yes.
Like the big symbiote.
The symbiote, yes, the symbiote venom. Yeah.
How do I not remember this?
I told him to get back in touch with us when Carnage arrived.
Yeah.
And this was
We had a big conversation
Honestly,
about this, and I went in and I was the one voting. I said we got to go over and check and see, because it's possible that some of Tamara's ghosts are moonlighting.
Yeah,
that they
we talked
moved
about
across.
it. Now,
What made him say that?
well, here's the deal. We're making fun of him. We probably shouldn't, because the more emails that came in, the more I got the idea there was probably some kind of psychological distress or illness underway. So we didn't obviously do that one, but it's very near where we are right now.
It got dropped because I was trying to get everybody to go over, and I said, well, what's going to happen if one of Tamara's ghosts is moonlighting somewhere?
Because the reason he's saying that is because it was just like right around the corner.
I mean,
from where we are right now,
right on top of it,
here
almost
at Pythian Castle. Anyway, so yeah, if you got a story you'd like to tell, you can email us, contact@mwghosthunters.com. We'd love to get more of those stories on the website, so the people who listen can kind of hear what the people who experience these things go through, rather than just hearing our side of it, where we come into the house and have these experiences, then we go home. But these are people who actually have to live with this kind of stuff happening.
In the middle of nowhere, in her case.
Yes, yeah, in the woods, if you can imagine. I live, with other houses right nearby, and sometimes I'm hauling ass up the stairs because I've convinced myself something's coming up behind me. So I can only imagine. Being out.
We should have asked her about what she meant when she talked. You made the joke. You kind of joked. I think it was a joke about Bigfoot. When you asked her about Bigfoot,
I did make a joke about Bigfoot.
And she
said she didn't have any Bigfoot experiences.
Of course, she hasn't seen Bigfoot, but she did say there was. I bet she has a story connected to something, because she talked about like in the Northwest or something, if I remember right.
Yeah,
I do.
A certain section of the wood. The problem you get into though is when you're in, depending on where she's at, the woods can have
animals,
a million creatures out there that's not paranormal at all. It could be everything from a deer to a rabbit to.
And I don't necessarily know the animals native to that specific area either. Hell, there could be a moose up there for all I know. So yeah, you're right. It would be hard. It would be hard to tell. We make fun of Bigfoot a lot, but I am not joking. If anybody's got a Bigfoot story,
I want to hear some genuine.
Yeah,
somebody who swears to God.
Well, it's like we said on the last podcast. There's these tales. Remember, I told you about the guy who shot what he thought was an animal, and then he said he realized it looked like a human.
Look, you really shouldn't be shooting at something that you don't know you want to kill.
Huh?
What do you mean he didn't know that?
Well, he was deer hunting.
He shot at something human shaped?
He shot at something furry.
That person doesn't need a gun.
We shot at something furry, and then he went over there. He thought it was a deer and realized it looked like a human. Remember, I told this.
Yeah, and he thought that he had killed a person.
He thought he killed a person.
So he does what the responsible person does, and that's hide the body. He hides the body and then he leaves.
And leaves on the person
and then
that he shot.
He leaves and he gets thinking, man, I think I killed somebody. I better go back and check and see if it's there. And he goes back, and whatever it was,
and Bigfoot
was gone.
Bigfoot pulled a Michael Myers.
Yeah.
He was gone. But anyway, those are the kind of stories. If anybody's got anything like that, we would like to hear.
There are some stories out there of people that claim to have encounters with Bigfoot. I mean, and they're people they're policemen and people that like you would normally trust. And will you stop making weird mouth noises?
Didn't need to do that.
For 5 minutes.
I was going to say, who's doing the lollipop thing?
Good Lord.
It was accidental, I swear to God.
Somebody get him a binky.
Go ahead.
I don't even remember. There are stories
Good.
out there.
I hope you don't, because we were talking about Bigfoot. So let's move on to something different.
But going back into whenever I first got involved with this whole paranormal thing here too. I mean, I thought that the whole ghost thing was a bunch of BS, and until I heard that audio from Chris from where it says burn, I didn't believe in it at all. And then I was like, okay, there's something here. But it was whenever I experienced it out in Willard. With Chris and Dustin, that's really when this really came home. So I'll listen to your story.
It's easy for us to sit here and be like, oh, that's ridiculous, until you're out in the woods in the middle of nowhere and you hear a screeching noise and look over and see a 7-8 foot tall hairy thing.
Regardless of whether you believe in Bigfoot or not, which I don't necessarily believe in it, I still have heard compelling stories.
Yeah, I do not either, and I've heard compelling stories, and I don't even really believe in any cryptids, but like Mothman was sighted again last week in Chicago.
I know.
By dozens of people.
If we get someone from Point Pleasant, did you hear that?
It was me.
Oh, okay.
Tyler reacting. What would you like to talk about, Tyler? Would you like to suggest a topic?
If we could get someone from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, who's got a Mothman story, that would make my week.
There's a really good Mothman story from a pilot at O'Hare.
I know.
Chicago.
I've read that.
It is really, really interesting.
Yeah, I know. Is it involve the air traffic control tower?
There have been air traffic controllers at Chicago O'Hare International Airport that have numerous air traffic control from there.
I know.
They say if you go there, it's like a rite of passage. Like if you become an air traffic controller at Chicago, like you're going to see him.
Yeah.
Like at some point.
I've read that, and that's just bizarre to me. The Point Pleasant and Chicago, there's no connection there. But either way.
There's Tyler Roll. We need to get video at some point. So we can get some reactions.
Of the podcast?
Yeah.
Get some video roll. What are we missing the target on the preferred topic?
Oh yeah, no, I don't know. He's not liking this cryptid stuff.
I would love it if someone emailed us with a cryptid story.
If you've got a story, we would love to hear from you. We really would.
Yeah, contact at mwghosthunters.com.
And we'll be back again with more Dark Matter next week from Pythian Castle in Springfield, Missouri with Midwest Ghost Hunters.